You know, the closer we get to modern times, the more and more I like these chapters. All right, so let's get into it. It's all about Europe. Chapter 7, Nation Building and Nationalism, right? Okay, so let's talk about where we left off. Okay, so Napoleon, right? You're thinking, hey, that's chapter 5. Well, remember, chapter 6 is all about industrialization, which is going on during Napoleon's time and also after Napoleon's time. So this is Europe in 1812, all right? And this area surrounded by this pink color is France and all its allies. So this is under Napoleon's rule in 1812. But of course, then we have the Congress of Vienna that turns it into this. Okay, and it's like, what is this, right? So like you can see like France and Spain, they keep their borders. Empire of Austria keeps its borders. But then we got this just cluster right here, right? So what's going on? So now we have this country called Prussia. But then we have this boundary of German Confederate States, right? And then, you know, Italy's all tore up, right? So we'll come back to this in a little bit. But I think what you can see, though, here's the result, though. So 1815 and 1871. Look at that. All right, so a lot of these areas kind of reclaim some of their territory they used to have. But really, we're going to see a lot of unification. Here's 1871, so we have the German Empire, and we see Italy combined back, and then we see these new areas like Belgium, and we see Germany expanding as well. I smell World War I coming. All right, moving on. So let's talk about some of these causes. Look at Napoleon, he's still creeping in here. So this is liberalism post-Napoleon, okay? So liberals oppose absolute monarchies. They're okay with monarchs, but they wanted a democratic representation. Okay, so maybe a constitution, maybe elected representatives. And liberals also believed in the ideas of the Enlightenment, which talks about having basically a lot of freedoms, individual rights. You know, people created equal. So they wanted religious freedoms, equality under the law, right? And in some cases on the European continent, that also include the nation unifying and having self-governing, right? So before 1848, conservatives was more about, they believed more in like legitimate rule of a king. Landowners had privilege, and the established church, whatever church it is, what's Protestant or Catholic, that was the religion you would be, right? So we find out that looking at the world we live in, or even the world in the 1870s, we know the liberals went out for the most part in Europe. Okay, and there's also this other idea of nationalism. So this is the movement to assert the interests of one nation separately from those other nations, and the desire for people with a common background to self-govern. So a couple things in there. So basically, believing in your country is the primary focus. It should be governed by those people with a common background. So that works in some cases, like we'll see in Germany. But in other cases, like the Austro-Hungarian Empire, they have lots of different people. And you can even look at this today, too. In some countries, it's kind of one people. In other countries, we have a diverse population in some countries. So nationalism today is looked as, it can be positive, but also can be looked negatively, too, because we don't always have the common people part in there. All right, so yeah, anyways, so this is a movement that was on the move, too. So nationalism and liberalism working together to make all these changes. And one thing I just want to point out is, when you think of nationalism and people being of one, we can't get into all the intricacies of all the different cultures at this time, but I just want to point out, like, if you look, Spain, France, wait, no, that's French and that's Spanish. So just seeing that a lot of these borders exist, they have a cultural, a similar culture, and again, we can't go into all the details, but when they share a language, a lot of times they're sharing a culture. So you can see, like, man, Germany, look at this. All these people speak German. Kind of makes sense for that country to end up looking like that. If they're going to unite as one people, see Germany here, right? But it was looking like this, right? If they're going to unite as one people, it's going to be easier if you speak the same language, if you have the same identity, right? And that's why Bismarck and others were successful. Same thing with Italy. Okay, so back to 1848, there we see a lot of revolutions, or at least rebellions, break out. And it's not just started in France again, man, but it moved to many other places in Europe as well. Okay, So let's get into it. So in France, poor harvest, economic issues, rejection of the conservative ways, the monarchies, that was why the revolution started. And basically, you see this in all countries. People are unhappy about something, right? So they want a new constitution calling for universal manhood suffrage and representative assembly, and a popularly elected president was established in France. So that was the outcome of it. We also see an all-German parliament chosen by universal manhood suffrage. So again, the people voted to meet in Frankfurt with the intention of writing a constitution, unifying the German states into one nation, but it was unsuccessful. But you see the desire here to have this German parliament, okay? Kind of unifying people. So then we have the Hungarians and the Czechs, okay? So these are both in the Austrian Empire for the most part. The Hungarians actually get their own legislature by the Austrian Empire, but the Czechs, they're kind of crushed with Russia's help. They didn't get their own, so sorry, Czechs. And then Italy, well, that requires another slide. So Italy, there was this idea of risorgimento. I think I'm saying it right. Yeah, we would say resurrection, the unification of Italy. So this is how Italy was left. All right, and then we see all these areas join in 59, 60, 66, and 70. Right. So, but at this time there was a bunch of city states. Florence being the capital of that state, I guess you would say. So there's this idea of, again, people speak the same language. Unifying kind of makes sense. It's one people, right? So Prime Minister Camillo de Cavour, I think that's how you say it, in 1852, he made an alliance, all right, with the French Emperor Napoleon III. And that's what you're going to see a lot of times. If you can't do it yourself, well, you just need someone stronger to help you out, right? And they provoked the Austrian Empire into war. So remember, Austria-Hungary is right here, right? And they controlled Lombardy, which is now northern Italy, and before this it was considered Italy. And basically they provoke war, and the Austrians lose because of Italy and France's help. And what they did, though, what the prime minister did, is he granted Savoy in France, so that'd be this area right here, gave it over to France. Hey, you help us, defeat them and get this area back. We'll give you that area back, or grant that to you. All right. He also sent the Piedmont army. So Piedmont is this area right here, right? Under the new Piedmont king Victor Emmanuel II, into the territories just outside of Rome. All right. To capture more areas. But basically, they got help from the French, and they were able to unify the states, again, because of this nationalistic fervor that was going on. They got Venetia in 1866. They were able to take that back, and the French left Rome in it says Rome. I should say Rome. Okay, so Rome was actually occupied by the French at this time, all but just a few blocks, and that area ended up staying not claimed by Italy, but it ended up becoming Vatican City. So just a few blocks in the middle of Rome is now Vatican City. But they were successful. They were able to gather it all up. All right. I think we're good there. Okay, so let's talk about nationalism in Germany, though. That's interests of one nation separate from others, right? And a lot, sometimes, not always, but depends. This was based primarily on ethnic distinctions. All right, so having a sense of these are one people. And it was based on unique cultural identity separate from others. It's not so much like, here's how we're the same. It's more like, hey, we're different than French people. We're different than Austrian-Hungarians, right? So this nationalism often led to this uniting factor, but again, not always. In some countries that doesn't work because they have a diverse population, but in this area, people had negative feelings about French occupation. And so, France controlled this area before 1850, really. And they didn't like that. So again, we talk about Prussia and people are like, what's Prussia? Is it Russia? Is it, where is this? Okay, so Prussia, again, this is mostly German speaking people, right? Today it's Poland as well here, but these are German speaking people, and this is very strong. So we have Prussia, part of the German Confederation, or inside what we call Germany now. Same thing with the Empire of Austria. So there's German people in here, but it's part of this larger empire. But Russia and France and Austria, so Russia, France, and Austria, kind of the big powers, they don't want this unification to happen. Why? Because they'll be very strong if they do. Prussia is already probably just as strong and populated as the Empire of Austria. If they can gather all these other areas as well, they'll be the new kids, the big kid on the block all of a sudden. So Prussia ends up dominating the old allies and the new enemies through diplomacy, working one against another, strategy. They actually had professional, it wasn't just a professional army, but it was also like professional full-time strategists on how they can win against a potential enemy. Not even that a war started, but hey, if we were to take out these people, how would we do that? And they just had better weapons. They ended up developing guns that were superior, more accurate, go farther, things like that. And so they were able to, bring war against the Empire of Austria at one time and the Kingdom of France another time, and they're able to win, okay? Even Denmark here, they end up losing part of it. So who did this? Well, it was two main people, really. We have Bismarck and Wilhelm. Sorry. He ends up becoming the Kaiser. He was the king of Prussia, but after he takes all of the German area, ends up being the Emperor, Kaiser Wilhelm, right? So Wilhelm gave his support to Bismarck, and Otto von Bismarck, he's the guy that really made it happen, though. He had this vision of uniting the German people, all right? So he was a believer in realpolitik, all right? He focused on not political theories and ideology, meaning like, hey, this is what conservatives do, this is what liberals do. No, it was more just like, how do we get this done, And it wasn't about morality. It wasn't like, well, what's right? No, he wanted to do whatever he thought was good for the German Empire. But he instead relied on practicality and pragmatism, okay? And that idea continues. Not everyone's totally one camp or another. Some people want to get things done still, too. All right, so that leads up to the Franco-Prussian War and its infamous letter. So we had that assignment where you're supposed to look at the letter and kind of decipher what the difference is there. And I could explain this, but honestly, this 2 minutes of the video does such a better job than I do, so I'm just going to play it.
So the rapid rise of Prussia was something that the French had not anticipated. In 1870, the German Prince Leopold, Wilhelm I's cousin, was offered the Spanish crown. The French Emperor, Napoleon III, did not want the North German Confederation to gain Spain as an ally and demanded that Wilhelm order his cousin not to take the crown. Wilhelm told the French he'll get back to them, and so sent a telegram to Bismarck. Bismarck edited the telegram so it sounded like Wilhelm rudely brushed the French off and published it. This made the French look weak and silly, so they declared war. So the French declaring war made them the aggressors, and thus the Prussians were able to gain the support of the southern German states. So to summarise the war, the French couldn't mobilise as many men, the French Emperor was captured, the French had another revolution because it was the 19th century, and so at this point, why not? The Germans pushed this far into French territory, and on the 18th of January 1871 at the Palace of Versailles, the German leaders declared the creation of the German Empire with Wilhelm I as emperor. The French soon after surrendered, agreeing to pay indemnities and giving Germany the territory of Alsace-Lorraine. So one of the great debates surrounding the German Empire is to what extent it was unification or simply Prussian dominance. The smaller German states felt that they were unable to protect themselves from their larger neighbours, but in return for protection found themselves dominated by Prussia. Except for Liechtenstein, which was fine. The dominance of Prussia is best seen through what is known as the Kulturkampf, the culture struggle. So, northern Germany was mostly Protestant, whilst the south had a large Catholic population. The Catholic Church had immense political authority, and Bismarck wished to remove its influence and strengthen the central government. Catholic bishops were arrested en masse, and Catholic institutions were sidelined, but ultimately it persevered. A unified Germany quickly became a great power. Bismarck negotiated an alliance with the Austro-Hungarian Empire and managed to secure some African colonies by calling the Berlin Conference with the other European powers. It experienced a population boom alongside rapid industrialization and urbanization, and also became a global center of science.
Please consider actually watching this entire thing. It's really fascinating. It goes all the way through World War I. Okay, so watch it again if you need to, though. But I think he said everything that we needed to. And I need to finish this in 50 seconds. Hey, collapse of the Ottoman Empire. Remember that awesome big empire? Well, hey, it's on it's going to fall soon. Okay, so let's talk about the collapse of it. So strong nations like Germany and Italy proved to be successful. The idea of people being united by ethnicity and language seems to kind of be winning out. There's also corruption and weak leadership, and there's lack of innovation and technology. All right, they didn't hit the Industrial Revolution like the other ones did early on. So they started lacking this area, and ethnic groups start rebelling, especially in Southeast Europe. Okay, and they've already lost this area, so we're only talking about an area like this large now. So, and we're gonna see it pretty much fall, and then the remnants of it ends up being Turkey someday. Okay. All right. That's it. Thanks. I did it in 15 minutes. Woohoo!